For many Americans and many people around the world on Sunday mornings, what that kind of looks like is you get up, you go to church. What they've been doing is they've been getting pamphlets together. They have people greeting you at the door. You come in, you get to do a little worship music, hear a good sermon. They pass the plate, they pray, everybody goes home. Now, that seems like a really nice day for church. The problem in all that is that that's not what the church was originally meant to do only. Now, of course, Jesus told us to go out and share the gospel, and that's exactly what most would argue is taking place in that moment. The problem is that 6 days a week, that building stays empty. And then all that money that comes in is really put there to help put on what I refer to as the Sunday show. There is no ministry. Most churches really don't have a ministry, and they're bringing in nationwide hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars every week, and it goes towards the people working within those four walls. There is no ministry there. And as we look at Malachi, it tells us in 3:8, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Well, why are they cursed? Verse 10, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. That is what it's all about. Most people look at their job as a pastor or their job in ministry as they put on the Sunday show. They work essentially 3 to 4 hours one day, and that's it. The other 6 days is just kind of dead space, dead air. It's just dead. But all that money still goes to being dead for 6 days a week. And it's very clear what we're supposed to do with that money. It says, so that there's food in his house. It's not to feed the pastors. You know, a question I think you should ask yourself is, does our church feed the hungry, or do they just feed themselves? If they're just feeding themselves, they're robbing God, and they're cursed with a curse. And what does this look like? Well, Matthew 24 and 25, the disciples were asking Jesus, how will we know when the end is here? And he talks about kind of what that might look like in the end times. And then he gets into in chapter 25, what judgment day kind of looks like. And he says that he'll separate the people from the sheep and the goats, and there'll be people to his left and people to his right. And it says in 24 verse 41, then he will also say to those on his left hand, depart from me, you cursed, there's that word again, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. I mean, that's pretty harsh. You're cursed, go spend eternity with the devil and the angels in eternal fire. Let's go on. Well, why? I mean, that's pretty harsh. I mean, you put on the Sunday show, you're worshiping, you're showing people God, but as they give you their billions of dollars or hundreds of millions, or even if you're a smaller church, you're bringing in tens of thousands. Well, why? Verse 42. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life. You know, it probably feels good putting on the Sunday show and then locking the door, shutting off the lights by 1, and then those lights stay off for 6 days. Meanwhile, those hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, there's hungry people right outside your church. There's so many homeless people probably right in the middle of your town, and you're not feeding them. You're not giving them anything to drink. You're not clothing them. You're not taking care of the widows or the orphans. You're just simply putting on the Sunday show, and that's all you're doing. If your ministry does not leave the four walls of your church, you have no ministry. It's as simple as that. You don't have a ministry. You're taking in millions of dollars to put on the Sunday show, and that's all the churches are doing. If they're spending the other 6 days a week feeding the hungry, now you got a ministry. Now you got something that Jesus could be proud of. But if all you're doing is taking in that money, and again, ask yourself, does our church feed the hungry, or do they just feed themselves? This is a big piece of what it is God is demanding of the church. And the bottom line is, you are cursed with a curse because of those tithes and offerings. Because it's the money that's causing you to be cursed. And just like Jesus said, then they will also answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and you did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it for me. It's really just kind of a thing that God has shown it to everybody. We've always known. The first church in Acts, they didn't put on a Sunday show. That's not what the church was designed to do. Yes, we're called to worship God. Yes, we're called to spread the gospel. But if all you're doing is printing some brochures, getting some volunteer greeters to open the doors, playing a couple songs, giving a good inspirational speech, and then shutting the doors, you have no ministry. You don't. And you are robbing God, and you are cursed with a curse as a result. And I pray that there's not a day where he separates us from the left to the right. And he says, I never knew you. I never knew you because I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me anything to drink. I was sick and you didn't take care of me. And you'll say, well, God, that never happened. But it happens every day in your town. It happens every day in your town. Every day in your town, people are going hungry, and you're taking in millions to simply put on a 45-minute show once a week. It is awful. And according to God, you are cursed with a curse. I don't make these messages to tell you you're cursed with a curse. I give these messages so there's change in the church. If this is hitting your heart, again, if you're a pastor, ask yourselves, if our ministry is not leaving the four walls, is it? Well, if it's not, you have no ministry. You don't have a ministry. You say you're a minister, but you have no ministry. You're just simply putting on a Sunday show. If you're a church member, ask yourself a very important question. It's an extremely important question. As a matter of fact, to Jesus, it's the things that'll separate the sheep from the goats. Is ask yourself, does our church feed the hungry, or do they just feed themselves? It's a very important point. Because people are coming in and they're laying their money on the altar of God, and you're just eating it and consuming it. You pay the rent or the mortgage, you pay yourself, you have no ministry. You're consuming the sacrifice of the altar, and you're cursed with a curse. But you know what? Until that day when Jesus separates the goats from the sheep, it's not too late. Again, I make these videos so there's change in the church, not so you're just cursed. I don't want the church to be cursed. Of course, the church is the bride of Christ. I love the church. But it's hard to watch the church whoring themselves out like the harlot that we all see them to be in this country. It's not that complicated. Quit whoring yourself out. Quit eating the sacrifice of the altar. Feed the hungry. Get out there. Have a ministry for the first time maybe in your life. Have a ministry. Many people have spent 40, 50 years being a minister, and they never had a ministry. I mean, that's a huge problem. And according to God, you're cursed with a curse. I mean, all you have to do is step outside the doors of your church and start feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, taking care of the widows and the orphans. That's it. It's not that complicated. If you're not leaving your church, it's not about the Sunday show. Sure, you put on a good show, and maybe you open up your doors Wednesday night for a youth group, but again, it's staying within the four walls. It's kind of like if I stay in my house and I never leave, and I tell everybody how much I'm helping the neighborhood, but I'm only helping myself. And you have hungry people right outside your doors, right outside, but yeah, you're taking all that money in. And maybe you're going to have a big feast after church as well. Again, feeding the hungry, you're just feeding yourself. I challenge everybody to ask that question about the church that you attend. If you're feeding the hungry, they're great. God, you know, again, there's people to Jesus' left and his right. The sheeps and the goats. Not everybody's a goat. Some people are sheep. That's great. But a lot of goats out there. Most goats. Most churches are filled with goats in America. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, it's not that complicated. Just do what Jesus told you to do. Why do they bring in tithe? Why did it say bring tithe into my house? So there's food in my house. Feeding the hungry, you're just feeding yourselves. If there's food in his house and you're eating it all, you're cursed with a curse. Not that complicated. And there'll be a day where Jesus will separate the sheep from the goats. And I pray that you're not sent to an eternal hell with Satan and his angels into the eternal fire, because in the end, you know, a lot of people spend 40, 50 years in ministry, but they never actually had a ministry. And all they did is consume millions of dollars and put it into their own home and their own bellies. And, you know, again, curses come with that. It's really not that complicated. So love to hear your thoughts on it. If you're at a church that is feeding the hungry, let us know. If you're at a church that's just feeding themselves, get out. They're cursed. Get out before you're cursed. But it's a real obvious measuring device if you're wondering, well, am I attending a good church or a bad church? Well, are they feeding the hungry? Or are they somehow ministering to those outside of their four walls? If the answer is yes, great. I recommend you put your tithe towards that church. But if your church is just feeding themselves and ministering to only those within the four walls, I recommend you get out immediately. I recommend you probably don't go this morning if you haven't already gone. So I recommend you stop immediately and exit that church and just let it die like it belongs where it belongs. So again, love to hear your thoughts on this. It's a hard message to give, but it's the truth. Bottom line, are you feeding the hungry or are you just feeding yourself? Jesus made it very clear what Judgment Day will be like and how he separates the sheep from the goats. And that curse, you know, God used that same language when he spoke to Malachi, and then Jesus, 400 years later, said the exact same thing. So, guys, I'm praying for you and your churches. Again, these are hard messages to make. It's hard to say these things about the church. I love the church, but if you're just putting on the Sunday show, you have no ministry. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support this channel through Patreon, that link is below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.